Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's National Operations Center of Excellence, or NOCO, webinar on key elements in an MPO TSMO plan. I'm Nick Ramfos. I'm NOCO's director. Today's webinar will be focused on addressing best practices on the development and implementation of transportation systems management and operations, or TSMO, plans that have led to mobility benefits in various regions. Earlier this year, NOCO published a best practice report on TSMO program planning, and we're going to share that link with you in our chat. The concept of a TSMO program plan is based on the idea that to incorporate TSMO as an integrated part of a transportation agency, TSMO-specific processes, strategies, and deployments must be designed to work with already existing institutional arrangements. And you're going to hear a little bit about that today. The TSMO program addresses the strategic, programmatic, and tactical elements of TSMO. And AASHTO's Transportation Operations Manual, which was published about 2 years ago, identifies 5 functions of a TSMO program plan. And that includes articulating the business case for TSMO, its role within the agency's mission, goals, and objectives, and its relationships with other agency programs and processes. It also highlights the value of TSMO in responding to specific customer service needs and deficiencies, new technology and business models, and opportunities for collaboration. It also specifies the TSMO-specific technical processes required to engineer TSMO systems and the planning and project development processes to implement them. It also addresses the critical roles, responsibilities, and capabilities needed to support continuous improvement to an effective TSMO program. And lastly, it identifies essential resource needs, including financial, staffing, and performance measurement resources. More information on TSMO program plans can be found in AASHTO's Transportation Operations Manual, or the TOM, in Chapter 5, which is really all about TSMO program planning. And we're going to share that link with everybody in the chat. So today, you're going to hear about strategic, programmatic, and tactical elements that are key components of a TSMO program plan. You're also going to hear about the management and improvements of a TSMO plan and considerations on the process to develop and/or update a plan based on the agency needs. Today's webinar speakers are experts in the MPO arena with respect to how TSMO plans fit into their respective agencies and regions, and they're going to share best practices and lessons learned on issues surrounding TSMO program planning and execution. Preparing a TSMO plan at the regional level can help with mainstreaming TSMO in the planning process in order to have TSMO strategies considered and integrated into all aspects of operational functions that include planning and design, as well as construction and maintenance. NOCO issued a peer exchange report earlier this year on sustaining TSMO, which can be found at this link that we're going to share with you. And the peer exchange report shares information from a cross-section of agency leaders and principal staff from MPOs, states, and cities with experience in developing and implementing TSMO plans, programs, strategies, and policies in their jurisdictions. The peer exchange benefited from the interaction among organizations of different sizes, breadth, and experience. So a few housekeeping items for today. This webinar is being recorded. A recording will be shared on our YouTube page and newsletter and will be available on the website within the coming week. To get the recording, please follow us on YouTube and register for our newsletter. Also, there's a link in the chat for that. And all participants are going to be muted throughout, so please use the Q&A chat box, not the regular chat box, but the Q&A chat box on your Zoom toolbar for any questions for our presenters. For general questions or anything else, you could just use the chat box. We'll be doing a Q&A after each speaker. This webinar also has closed captioning and transcription options as well. and you can access those on your Zoom toolbar. So before we begin, I just want to thank all of you who are joining us today. And first up today is Joseph Hacker. He's a principal of Transportation Technology and Operations with the Atlanta Regional Commission, or ARC. And then we're going to hear from Caleb Winter, who's the program manager for TSMO at Metro in Portland, Oregon. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to handle Q&A after each speaker. So we'll probably handle like 1 or 2 questions after each speaker, and then we'll open it up, time permitting, for additional questions for both speakers at the end. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Joseph with ARC.
Hello, here, let me get my slides up. I think we got it. Am I there? Yeah.
Not yet.
Is it showing now?
No.
Oh.
There it is. You're good.
Don't freak me out. Hello, everyone. I saw about 75 folks out there. Thank you, Nick, for the introductions. Today, I'm going to spend some time talking about TSMO plan and a plan update. We're in the process of getting a plan update together, and so this is a timely venture for us so that we can, gives me some opportunity to reflect on what we've done and where we're going and what we think we want to do. My program is going to be in 3 parts. I'm going to do a little bit of a setup. I'm going to talk about our plan and how it reflects NOCO best practices and perhaps where it doesn't reflect NOCO best practices, and then some reflections on what the update is looking like. I'm waiting for it to advance. There we go. So let me introduce myself. I'm Joseph Hacker. As Nick said, I'm the principal planner for technology and operations at the Atlanta Regional Commission. Only for a couple of years, only for like 18 months. So I'm somewhat new to this, but I'm not new to planning. Prior to that, I was at Georgia State University, where I was a clinical professor of planning and economic development for 12 years. And I worked at DVRPC, Go Birds, for about 12 years. I saw some DVRPC people on there. Nice to see that. And then I was a planner, County of Delaware. And prior to that, in '97, I got my doctorate in MA in city and regional planning at the University of Pennsylvania. So, you know, nearly 30 years of this and so in the planning profession. So it's kind of cool. Picture there is at the ITS World Congress recently. I'd be curious, with a show of thumbs, how many folks were at ITS World Congress? Any of you all? 1, 2, 3. 3 of you. 4. All right. Well, I think I wanted to start with that because certainly the ITS World Congress set me up to begin to think about the plan and what I can do. And I had a couple takeaways that shape what you're going to see in the rest of this. There's so many things to talk about with the plan, but a couple of takeaways that you're going to see come up over and over again. This idea that there's the speed of technological change. I don't think there's any mystery about this. Software, hardware, scalability. To me, it was astounding. And like I say, we'll talk about this more later. I thought if I had to put a key, I should have put this one first, but using versus applying technology. And I make that distinction in using the question, what is the problem being solved? When we apply technology, we're solving a problem. When we're using technology, I think we're just trying it out. Vulnerable road users. I went to quite a few sessions where this was a significant theme, and I think you're going to see this reflected in some of the things I'm going to talk about, where the end user really is who needs to be should not be lost in the consideration of these plans. And then finally, privacy and cybersecurity. As we make the technology more convenient, it's much more open to being hacked. And there were a number of fairly scary examples given in that I thought, wow, like we know this, but it really needs to be at the forefront of our thinking in many respects. And I want to give a shout out here to Lori Matkowski. She's with GFT now, former colleague at DVRPC, cubicle neighbor, and she helped shape my thinking on a bunch of these items. So off to the races. What are we? Well, we're the Atlanta Regional Commission. You can see we're the 19 county MPO, home to about 6.1 million people. We're expected to grow to 7.9, so another 1.5 million plus in the next 25 years. That's a lot of folks. And I think it's important to note here, and Caleb and I, when we talked yesterday, it sort of comes up, this idea that we don't own, manage, nor operate any TSMO assets, right? So I think that's mostly done by Georgia DOT, and I think it's important to say that, just in the sense that if we were owning and operating it, we might have our plan might look different, or our approach to the plan might be different. So I think it's worth saying that in many cases as we think about it. Right. What's our vision? One great region. You can read this. We foster thriving communities, right? We value excellence, integrity, and equity. One of the things I noticed in putting this presentation together, and you'll see that there's a lot of goals and visioning. And I think this is some of our foundational institutional goals that we work with. And so I need to put that there. I think it's important to realize where we're coming from. And you can look on the right there, healthy, safe, livable communities. That falls nicely into TSMO. Strategic investments, excellence and efficiency, diverse stakeholders engagement, competitive economy, all these things, TSMO falls into them in some way. I don't mean to be didactic here, but I thought it's certainly worth taking a second to think about TSMO. You'll see this again in a different context, but you can see, there's all these different TSMO strategies. Some examples: traffic incident management, integrated corridor management, parking management, traveler information, freight management, traffic signal management. I think some of the things, when we think about, these are kind of the hardware elements of it, but some of the elements that aren't included here that I think are essential, and as we start thinking about the plan, are the connections, the links, the physical ties between the systems. We'll talk about that in a minute. The agreements, the cross-jurisdictional, the intergovernmental agreements that make these work. Taken in isolation, none of these work. They only work when they are connected. Also want to shout out here that there's a couple of non-ITS strategies available here. And let me go to this next slide here. This is like, I have 70 slides. So so we can see a lot. I'm just kidding. I don't have 70 slides, but let me just show you some TSMO in our region here. And I think that it's important to look at this in the upper left corner, this roundabout. That is a TSMO, that is a Transportation Systems Management and Operation application, a strategy right there. And it's as low tech can be. I was recently at a TRB conference on roundabouts, and it was fascinating the degree to which these can be used and how they're used, and the effectiveness that they meet all the goals that you would think of with any of our sort of ITS laden opportunities. In the middle there at the top is also, it's a Waymo I don't know if y'all have this, but this is automated vehicles. We have them in Atlanta now. There is no place you can go in the downtown or the city area, the in-town area, where you don't see these driving around. There is no driver in them. They had, right? It's a little weird sometimes, but they are very visible, and will pick you up and take you somewhere. So, right, this is a really interesting example of private industry. You can see the 511. This is a GDOT. This is a traveler information. This was developed for the Olympics. You can see at the bottom, this is a smart project in Gwinnett County. I'm going to talk about an application of that in a little bit. And right to the bottom right there is another project. This is called the Wendy diagram. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. So what was done for our last plan? I'm not going to read this to you, but what I have highlighted there is what I think ended up being the most important part of our plan. And I'm going to end up talking about that a good amount later. And that is, we developed what's called a local agency deployment guide. This is a great item in our plan. If we think about plans before this, our first plan was around the early aughts, 2004, I think. That's our first architecture. Our second plan, which is the plan you're looking at here. And then we're having, in the middle of an update, we're going to have an RFP on the street in the fourth quarter of this year. And we expect to have that finished by 2027. So there's an evolution in thinking here, which I'll allude to as we move on. And I think a lot of this is going to be about what we've learned. So there we go. Part two here. One of the things Nick referred to is this best practices sheet. I took a few minutes and I looked through these resources, these different plans there. And I thought it was fascinating. Like, why would you choose ARC versus DVRPC or Genesee Finger Lakes or any of them? When I looked through them, they're all great examples of strategic, programmatic, or tactical best practices. But I think where they differ is in their emphasis area. I think also when I'm thinking about these, when I look at this, I'm thinking about what is the delta, right? As a takeaway, right? Again, it says reflections. These are the spoilers. I'm giving you the answers in advance, but what is the delta since our last plan? Like, what changed? Like, what did you move? What's the critical factor that was changed, right? So we want to know that. What is the delta? And maybe part of that is part of what I'm here for, I'm glad for, is I want to steal your ideas. I'm not sure how much I have to give you, though I am going to give you something, but I'm interested in what you are doing out there, because I think that's going to tell me what worked. And that's what I want to know. And then again, let's plan, how will this plan benefit the user? And I think of the user in a couple of ways, both the user of the plan, but also the end user. What are they going to do with this? All right. Let me see. Let me start talking about the architecture. All right. The architecture is required. The rest of the document, to a large degree, is not required. Or it could be done many different ways, but the architecture is the architecture. And I remember when I was still at DVRPC, we did some of the first, we started with the architecture back in the early aughts. And I just remember no one having multiple rooms multiple times with elected officials and different folks in there and trying to describe what the architecture is. And I'm going to tell you that, I have here, who is responsible for it? What is the information flow? What is the thing, right? What is the hardware there? What does it do? These are all explanations of the architecture, but I have to say that, sometimes we're not sure what this part of the document does aside from being required. Now, I'm sure I'm looking forward for someone to tell us this. I don't know. Later, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we see here. And the architecture is not really looked at online very much. So I don't know if everyone already has it, if the vendors already have internalized it. If GDOT just, this is like the rules that they give to everyone, but it's a required portion of it. And it's a portion that when I have to stand up in front of our board, I have to be able to explain in some way what this is. And this slide here is about as clear as I can come to it, and explaining that it just really outlines the relationship between these parts. And folks seem to nod their head and I'm able to move on. So I'm going to leave that there. Come on. All right. Now we're getting to it. When we think about best practices, again, I think that everyone's plans had all the parts, but I think the parts reflect the emphasis of the region's capabilities and strengths. So what ARC may be capable of, what our region may be capable of, may be different than what Oregon Metros or DVRPC or any other places out there. And what I'm going to focus on here, and as we go through it, that's kind of going to be it, but we're going to talk about our plan running through the business case, our vision and program mission, our priority functions, programmatic objectives, TSMO culture, implementation, and prioritize services, activities, and projects. One at a time, because I just want to give a sense for all those out there. I heard a lot of you are interested in, you're all getting updates. This may be something I'm just going to open up the hood of the car and let you look at the engine here. Right, so what was our process for development? I'm sure all of our processes are somewhat similar. Can't say for sure, but so there's no surprises when you look at this. Ultimately, what you're going to see later in this is that I'm going to switch defining the building blocks and developing a common vision. You're going to see the reason for that. But giving it away in advance, it's about data-driven policy, and I think I want to emphasize that moving forward. Looking backward, this looks like every other plan I've ever worked on, there's nothing wrong with it. Right, so why do we need it? Well, if you know anything about Atlanta, you know it's got a lot of traffic. And you can see here that the biggest problem facing residents in the Metropolitan is transportation. And typically what they're talking about there is congestion. Honestly, this isn't that much different from other places. Maybe the numbers are different, the delay or the times of day or that kind of thing. But I think this is a pretty broad justification for this TSMO plan. And I think it probably is a pretty broadly used across the board. What about a business case for TSMO? Well, let's be direct. TSMO is cheaper than building your way out of it. TSMO is cheaper and yields results. I'm not expecting you to read all these tables here, but you're getting 9 times the investment payout. You're getting 17 times the investment, right? So your dollar costing, put $1 into a TSMO project involving optimized traffic signals, and you're getting $17 worth of value out of that. That's pretty good. When you look at the traditional road capacity, you might be able to expand the road and your dollar might yield close to $3 in benefits, but that pales by any of these other TSMO TSMO strategies. And what I would also say here is that the TSMO in many respects is less invasive. We don't have to stop traffic. We don't have to have construction in the same way. So there's another savings there. So, right, so there is a business case here. I don't want to pull too hard on this, but I think that there is clearly a business case here. And I think you'll see that this is layered throughout our plan, that this recognition that there's a benefit just comes up over and over again. So what is our vision? Right, I've highlighted a couple things here. In this case, the vision drove our plan. Optimize safety, reliable travel times, efficient, seamless travel, environmental benefits, right? These are all things that when I look at all of your plans, they all look somewhat similar. I have asterisks here besides equitable access. Not sure if we're allowed to talk about equity, but I think of TSMO as a lot like some elements of transit, where good TSMO is inherently equitable. If it's working for the region, then everyone benefits, right? This isn't something I can't TSMO your apartment or something like that. So I think that while we maybe not be able to use the word equitable, I think we can find that TSMO, when it's working, functions for everyone, not for individuals, which makes it equitable. What are our foundational elements? Moving people and goods, collaboration, data sharing, adaptability. Again, nothing new here, nothing exciting here. One thing I want to point out is moving people and goods. Often what gets left aside in these conversations is TSMO as it relates to freight. I think that's not the right approach. I think freight, everything needs freight. Everything revolves around freight, and I'll get to this more later. Adaptability. Easier said than done. I think I regard that as a significant challenge. So at the programmatic level, what are we doing? Well, we have a 3-tiered evaluation process using goals and metrics. And these are called our key decision points, right? So after we have a regional call for projects, we call for and filter projects. And and the first way we go through it is kind of what I call a sniff test. They must comply with federal highway, GDOT, and ARC complete street policies, accommodating all modes in a safe and context-sensitive manner. I mean, that is TSMO light right there. It's already getting to it. Through this slide in here, just to show this process a little bit, I worry about too many words here, but one of the criteria is mobility access, safety. Are we reducing travel times? Are we reducing fatalities? I'm going to show this a different way. This KDP2, this is a modeling type run. You can see there that these results incorporate mobility and access. It's circled up there in our program. Does it improve congestion? I think that's the wrong word. Sounds like it's making more, but does it relieve congestion? Does it improve access? Right? These are all TSMO, hallmarks of TSMO. You get to the bottom on resiliency. Does it reduce air pollutants? Does it, under safety, does it improve safety? Right? These are all things TSMO that are marbled into it. And quite frankly, projects that come under our TSMO banner do very well under these. And these were not developed for TSMO. So what is this? This is a roadway expansion project. So depending on what that expansion is and how it's used, what that project would look like, it gets a number ranking on it. And then finally, as part of our programmatic part of it, we look at it at a benefit cost. And here, when you do that math, TSMO projects rise to the top very quickly. They're effective, And their cost benefit is very good. These summaries are directed to our executive director and voting board for decisions, right? So that's our process. We already know these things are good. Shifting to tactical, what are best practices here? I'm only going to focus on one here because I think this is a really good one, and that is our deployment guide. And I think the approach, again, I did not make this document, or I was not involved with that, but we created something, a document that empowers the user with information in order for them to gain a better understanding and provide high-level information and guidance on things they may be interested in. We're arming the user. We don't know who's going to look at it or who needs this. So we've created sort of a matrix of choices and what they could do and how they could work. And let me show you what that looks like a little bit. Right, our menu of options, right? We're matching TSMO goal strategy to goals. So for each strategy, there's a description. There's how does it support, what goals does it support, how is it applied, what contexts can it be successful in, your costs, benefits, and other considerations. And again, with other considerations, I want to say, and this fits in with architecture, these would be connectivity, intergovernmental agreements, that kind of thing, and then a reference page, just so folks could click on a link and decide where it is, what it is they're looking at. Right, so what strategies are in the deployment guide? Well, if you look at the bottom there, have a bunch. These were reflected in that earlier email with the cogs. I think that's, most of them. And if you look at them, you can, they all make sense. I think these are all chosen because they are part of our inventory in the region, so that use that. And again, I highlight freight management because, again, freight doesn't get enough love. And I believe that freight is essential to all the goals in our region, because everything we use and all the goods that we have are delivered. Someone from Federal Highway a couple of years ago told me, we're talking about highways, they go, the last mile of everything is using rubber tires. I think they're right about that, even if they're robot rubber tires, which we'll talk about in a second. Right, so a question, one of the things that concerns me is about legibility. Like, to what degree is it used or whatnot? So this has been up on our web for 5 years. So you fast forward 4 years, in the last year, we've had 391 views and 227 unique users. Right, so we're getting 32 daily views and about 18 downloads a month. This is, 4 or 5 years in. So this stuff is being used, and it's not just me downloading the things over and over again for the PowerPoint. These are like actual users. We looked at it, where they're coming from, a lot of CIDs, local communities, whatnot, are just showing their interest. And of these downloads, you can look here, and the strategic plan, which is sort of the big picture of what we're doing, is one of them. But the deployment guide is right on its heels. A lot of that's being downloaded. There is a regional inventory section. It's downloaded much less so. It really falls off after the plan and the guide. But I think it's worth noting that the deployment guide has been a fairly active living document. So I can't go forward without talking about what it said in our opportunities to grow in our strategic plan. And I think, where do we need to pick it up? right? And this is back in 2020. And some of the ideas here, we need a dedicated TSMO committee. There had been, these committees are difficult to keep going in many respects. Inconsistent understanding of TSMO. There's no meeting I attend or go to where I don't give them the overview of what TSMO is, like I did in this meeting, because people don't always understand it and we need to have the same understanding. We need a current inventory of software platforms. One of the things I learned for sure at ITS World Congress, it's not so much the hardware that we're concerned with, though hardware is important, but increasingly we're seeing that people are bringing software solutions to the current hardware. And more people are selling hardware or software, not hardware. The hardware is out there, but you know what I'm saying. And then finally, gaps in data sharing, data platforms, and data governance. I think I had already mentioned that. Right, so being fairly new to TSMO, I didn't really understand thinking about our update. What do I need to know? And I got involved with this connected transportation network project. It's with the ITS JPO at Federal Highway. And as a quick overview, it's sort of think of it as an app that provides both navigation, connected vehicle, TSP, indoor navigation, a whole range of things, ostensibly built for the elderly or the disabled, but it's sort of a universal type of app. And one of the things with walking through it, I realized that a lot of the issues that we are struggling with in this project, our peers are also struggling with, that we were not struggling alone, that these problems that we thought were unique were not unique. We also noted that the speed of technological change sometimes exceeds the problems. What we thought would work 5 years ago, some of those technologies may have sort of taken a side path. Scalability drives regional success. User availability. You can see in this map here that this corridor where we're doing the work. I was on a presentation to the State Independent Living Council of Georgia, their board, talking about this project. And when it came to Q&A, one of the head of the board asked me, so this will be available across Georgia. I almost burst out in tears because I had to tell them that, this is like a small wedge of Gwinnett County. That this scalability, like when this thing is everywhere, when it's all interconnected, then it will work for everyone. But getting it to work even in these small places is challenging. But again, scalability is what's going to make it work at the regional level. We realize that business practices, intergovernmental agreements are essential, but they're also limited. And I have here by unique situations, try again. We had a bunch of situations where servers were turned off for rebooting at one point in Gwinnett County. And when they came back on, some of the add-ons were not also flipped on with it or rebooted with it. And so they didn't work. And it wasn't that the folks, once they were alerted to it, didn't know how to do it and they did it, that was fine. But that it just wasn't part of the business plan because it was new. And it occurs to me that every new application is going to require a new business practice or agreement. And it's also limited by the workforce, right? There are only so many IT people in Gwinnett County and they can't be everywhere at once putting out a million fires. And so I think that there is something we forget along with freight perhaps in these agreements is who's doing this work. Whoops. So, as I said before, we're in the process of putting up an update. What does that look like? And again, thanks to Lori Matkowski for this. But what is the delta since our last update, right? Really thinking about what it is we've done or haven't done since then. And so we're conceptualizing this by putting a peer review of best practices first, right? We want to know what is working elsewhere. We want the facts first, and then we want to update the vision and goals. I was a professor in a policy school, and data-driven decisions were like the mantra of everything. Keep the end user foremost in mind, right? Did it meet the systems engineering gets to this, but did it meet the needs of the user? Is it secure? Is it private? How is the tech applied? It's not just that, again, it's not just that you're using the tech, but that you're applying it to solve a problem. And I'm almost there, friends. Right, so I'm coming back to where I started about all of our plans and when you think about your updates. And I think, you know, we're all going to have different emphasis areas because we're all doing different things differently. Our capabilities, our strengths are all different. I think we need to think about what's changed. What have we changed? What's changing? I think those are serious considerations looking forward. Steal that idea. I cannot, you know, I'm here presenting you best practices from ARC, and really I'd like to hoover all your brains to find out what you're doing right. That's what I really want to know. And then how will the plan benefit the user? I couldn't resist. I had some leftover musings, and I wanted to just, this is my last slide, and I just wanted to sort of take a second here. Things that didn't really fit into the rest of the presentation, but as we start thinking about being a TSMO manager, you know, what does keeping up with change look like? That to me is a fascinating question because I don't know that we have a full model for that. This is our third time around with an update, and we're just now starting to get our handle on that. Capabilities, right? How do we coordinate? Who coordinates? How do we keep up with changes in the need to coordinate? You know, maybe the governance strategies we have are obsolete, and maybe it's not about governance. Maybe it's some other, you know, there's some other sort of way or capabilities that we need to move these things forward. I think it's important to foster both public and private deployment. There's certainly a public realm that I am entrusted with, but there's also a private realm, such as these Waymo cars, or now these, we have in Atlanta anyway, we have little robots on the street that are delivering food downtown to different agencies and whatnot. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool, but that's not what I would do because I'm in the public sector. So I think it's a great model for thinking about things. And I think, you know, we need both of those elements. And lastly, legibility. Again, how is this meaningful? All of us have seen or created reports that they say sit on a shelf or become a doormat. I think what's important here is how, you know, what brings meaning to this update, and then how will the folks that read it understand it? And with that, I am done. And Nick, I've gone a little long. I apologize, but that is my presentation.
Okay. Thanks, Joseph. A couple questions. How has the plan and maybe some of the strategies been viewed by your ARC board members, or just the board, and maybe some of your stakeholders?
Yeah, that's really good. Again, I think that there's varying understandings of what it is. And so a roundabout, maybe as far, maybe as TSMO as any place could be, we think about public works directors in some of the outlying counties, and they're like, why would I need roadside units? You know, how does that help me? And then I have communities that have gone all in on creating connected, you know, embracing connected vehicle technology. I think the example I like to use is Marietta, Georgia. They needed to, they were having problems or issues with response times for fire trucks. And so they were talking about centralizing the location of their firehouse, which was very expensive. What they did instead was they came up with signal preemption for their fire trucks. And what it did was it reduced the time sufficiently so they were able to keep, they didn't have to build anything, buy and build anything, right? So they clearly embraced it. They had a problem and they embraced the technology to solve that problem as a way to avoid these other messy mixes. So I think it's a mixed bag.
Okay. And you touched on this a little bit, but I think you talked a little bit about connected vehicles and some of the robots. And I know there's a lot going on in Georgia with V2X. How is that being considered as part of the overall strategies in the plan as you move forward?
Yeah, I think that falls, you know, depending on what we're talking about specifically, it's kind of this public private. We want to move the public availability, the scale of the roadside units, the fiber that GDOT's putting down. We want to get this out there, but also we want to foster Waymo. You know, we hear are the bad things in the news, but I'm here to tell you, I see a dozen of them a day, and it stopped for my bicycle the other day. Right? So I think that, you know, there's a multi-tiered approach, and I think that we're not 100% sure how that would proceed, but I think we're needing to be open to it because it's happening faster than we can get our arms around it.
Okay, great. All right. We're gonna move over to Caleb now. So Caleb, it's all yours. Thanks.
Thanks, Joseph and Nick. You're seeing my slides?
Yes.
Great, thanks. My name is Caleb Winter, and I'm a TSMO program manager at Oregon Metro. And before TSMO, my background started, I realize I should say, started all the way with Max Light Rail Transit Project as an intern here in the region. And that certainly is exciting for an MPO and for a transit agency. But my interest has always been in how to improve air quality and reduce reliance on private autos. So I appreciate everyone attending today, demonstrating some shared interest. My first full-time transportation job was for a program evaluation for the region's Transportation Demand Management Program, or TDM. So I will be using some acronyms, and I just want to cover a few of those. I first worked at TriMet and then joined Metro in 2006. I worked closely with my planning colleagues who were initiating planning around intelligent transportation systems, or ITS. And then in 2009, they invited me to consider how demand and system management can work together as part of the region's first 10-year plan. In addition to reducing single occupant vehicle trips to improve system reliability, we also identified the need to support more real-time traveler information as sort of the nexus of TDM and TSMO. So in 2014, I stepped into the TSMO program manager role, and by 2020, I led the update of what is now our region's 10-year TSMO plan. And I would say, going back to Nick's introduction to this webinar, I'd say a lot of my presentation is about how TSMO fits in an MPO's regional planning work. And so I'll introduce the Portland Region's MPO and then talk about TSMO connections to regional planning and policy. And we're a couple years out from updating our plan. So I don't have the freshness Joseph has of looking into the future and seeing what's ahead. We're in kind of an implementation phase. And then I'll talk about how we organize the TSMO as a regional program. So we have more than 1.7 million people in Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington counties. The agency's boundaries encompasses Portland, but also 23 other cities. And we stretch from the Columbia River in the north to the Willamette River near Wilsonville in the south. And we go towards the Coast Range and over to the Sandy River that starts the Columbia Gorge. And let's see, we have a voter-elected regional government that includes our council president, Lynn Peterson, from a region-wide vote, and then 6 councilors from districts within the region. And we also elect an auditor region-wide. So land use and transportation planning has been very important to Portland, to Oregon. And a regional design of town centers, industrial areas, parks, and places that all connect through modal systems, so we can walk, roll, catch a bus safely, allow freight vehicles and deliveries, and share with motor vehicles while accommodating emergency response vehicles is all kind of the layered approach we have. So probably many of you are modal planners or working in these areas. And while Metro doesn't own or operate right-of-way, we support these systems through operations planning, convening partners, and funding priority projects. And so we'll talk about some TSMO planning and policy, which I think is important. Joseph talked about that guiding work ahead for updating the TSMO plan. So Metro is an agency, an MPO. We have our regional transportation plan, and I'll go into some of those elements. What is TSMO? It's a planning for operations that is consistent with the long-range regional transportation plan. So simply put, we're following policies that are established by the elected leaders I showed, who are also connected to our communities across the region. And today in the 2023 RTP, that's goal 1, to plan for mobility options that are well connected, low carbon, safe, reliable, efficient, accessible, and welcoming. And TSMO amongst that is a holistic systems approach. It's broad, that inspires innovation in the region, and is focused on improving efficiency of the existing system. And I think you'll see that echoed in many, in all the TSMO plans. It's foundational. And one way we started changing the conversation, this is going back to that 2009 start, is to break down the causes of congestion. And early understanding of where TSMO can benefit is seeing that 60% of congestion is an operations issue or can be helped or solved through operational and technology improvements. Reducing traffic incidents and alerts to weather conditions, work zones, and events can all reduce congestion at the source. Traffic signals on arterials can be optimized and also prioritized for demand in real time. And transit delay occurs. I wanted to mix that in. We didn't have necessarily a view of that, but I talked to my TriMet colleagues, and some of their delays are caused by operator availability, which is not necessarily directly TSMO, but it can improve from other parts of delay, can improve from safety partnerships, alerts to both the operator and the traveler, and traffic signal prioritization. So a little blurry, this comes the distant past, 2012, but planning envisions a future, and while the TSMO future is a bit more hidden than roads, sidewalks, and bridges, this image mix is what we use today, even if we don't see it. Technology over the last decade has enabled and improved how we use mobility options and avoid delay. All of a region's operators can improve these by sharing data and with each other, and making it open source, joining public-private partnerships, and reaching more of the traveling public and freight. While we're making progress, we don't lose sight of what's important in our region's future. And from 2015 to 2019 crash data, our safety planners analyzed that on average, there were 60 crashes per day in our region with serious or were life-threatening, and 1 death every 3 days in our region. So 38% of these fatalities in 2019 were from people walking, and safety planners saw that rate of pedestrian fatalities going up. So Oregon DOT analysis showed that there were disparities by race and crash rates. These disparities showed that Black people experienced the greatest disparity in pedestrian deaths, followed by Indigenous, Latino, Asian, and Asian people, who also have a higher rate of pedestrian injury than the state average. This is one illustration of disparities experienced by our residents and discussed in regional policy. MPOs are in a place for these conversations that can put policy into practice. So when we began with our last TSMO strategy update. We had this policy already in place for Metro leaders agreeing that by addressing barriers experienced by people of color, we will effectively also identify solutions and remove barriers for other disadvantaged groups. And the 10-year TSMO plan update began with this task 0, essentially to align with policy. So that's the TSMO key element or takeaway, and ours was how to incorporate equity. Myself, colleagues, community representatives, and FAIR and peers consultants worked on a schematic that became this TSMO equity tree to guide the plan update and future project work. The roots include context, choices, and voices in our region, and then the branches and leaves of the tree carry questions that reflect areas from workforce development, very important to TSMO, and also data sharing, also important to TSMO. So this strategy and planning process is pretty standard milestones. Each of these tasks were to step through these milestones from left to right. We reflected on the first 10-year plan, and we're also guided by that adoption of the 2018 RTP at that time, which included TSMO policy along with the congestion management process and other important elements to TSMO. In Metro's language, we have one regional plan. So the RTP, that's the only thing we call a plan. And then the rest of these are modal and management strategies. So I'll be talking about the TSMO strategy from now on. Each strategy is defined as a series of actions to achieve the desired outcomes, which trace back to the region's policies. All right. Let's see. So just skipping through I'll provide a link. You can look at where we ended with goals, objectives, and all that, but just summarize the changes that equity in 2010 was one of many outcomes. And in 2021, we have a goal of beginning projects with racial equity incorporated and people's voices initiate priorities. We had a multimodal approach to congestion in 2010, and we're asking in our current strategy, whose congestion and what are people's mobility and access needs? How can we better serve all our residents? And then in 2010, we had a lot of decisions that incorporated some residential demographics, but what can we do with what we're hearing, the needs, and can we start looking at origin to destination as TSMO is really operating for people to get from point A to point B. And this map is now in the 2023 RTP policy chapter. It is the result of priorities of all our regional partners on which arterials and highways need to be actively managed. The conversation informing this map brought out some important discussion. I'll just share one example. City of Portland and Washington County have a border that's right in the middle of one of our hilly areas. That's the first area to get snow and ice in the winter. And the two agencies sometimes have different travel advisory messages, not helpful to the traveling public. So recognizing that issue, put that arterial on the map. And this map is also available for cities and counties to use in complying with the new regional mobility policy as updated as they update their long-range plans. This policy changed through Metro and Oregon DOT's efforts and work to offer more performance measures than relying on volume to capacity ratios. Instead, completing the TSMO system, meaning actively managing these arterials, highways, and transit routes, is an accepted method to meet mobility policy. And that goes along with transportation demand management, which is also an accepted method. And together we developed a guide for both TDM and TSMO for local agencies to follow. let's see, but both TDM and TSMO programs can't succeed with Metro funding alone. And certainly a plan or strategy gives you that opportunity to share what resources you think are needed based on the activities ahead. And so with our first 10-year plan, the region recognized that we needed to sustain efforts. That was just, it was very ad hoc as to whether any of this ITS work got funded at all. So we solved that. That's kind of the yellow area where I call it budgeted, but we make policy decisions that lead to that budget as a program. But also, as Joseph was indicating, these are highly competitive projects in terms of return on investment. So we can, our partners compete for funding, and we can add, maybe another good chunk in that green, but we're still not meeting necessarily what we need to work through the whole and implement the whole TSMO strategy. Shifting a little bit to organizing TSMO, Metro's role is to convene partners, and a key element of TSMO is that organizing and collaborating. I'll share an objective out of our new TSMO strategy or recent TSMO strategy, and the one that's all about collaborating across regional partners. So we collaborate to provide consistent travel experiences across jurisdictional boundaries through knowledge sharing on best practices to multimodal traffic signal timing, integrated payment and scheduling systems, integrated corridor management, and data sharing between agencies. And that collaboration extends to emergency management, working across agencies such as the traffic incident management programs that are hallmarks to TSMO, and through planning. We're currently underway with an update to our emergency transportation routes that are designated for investment to help in the event of a natural disaster. And we also extend collaboration with travelers, which links us to a demand management program. And also when major capital project discussions are going, always good to talk about something. Our example is integrated corridor management. We had a TSMO planning effort going on the same time there was project going ahead for increasing interstate capacity and tolling. So another important thing is as a planner, is to be humble. There are so many people involved in implementing TSMO, and you can see that, with the different levels of engagement, this kind of spaghetti diagram. So who's engaged, who's a contributor, and when are folks leading the effort? So the green line here, planning, certainly any planning phase, it's TSMO at the region-wide system level. But then as we get over to project development, and we might have programmed projects to move forward, we're turning that over to experts in ITS, right-of-way, design, engineering, construction, the traffic operations, and then you can see where the leads are when it's already in place, deployed in practice. There's operations and maintenance level that continues on. And I think that's a helpful way to step through who's going to be involved. There's no room where only planners are meeting about moving TSMO forward. Just some outcomes from our projects. We're achieving regional outcomes through TSMO. This map shows investments in upgrading signalized intersections around the region along high injury corridors shown in orange and equity focus areas marked in blue. These investments help us roll out the next generation of transit signal priority that was shown to save riders 8 minutes between Gresham on the east side of the region and downtown Portland and back. The TSMO investments are helping our region achieve other outcomes, reducing tailpipe emissions, increasing reliability by reducing delay across all modes. And we're also helping the region be accountable for and good stewards of public resources by helping to reduce the capital cost and the cost for traffic engineers and transit operators to do their job. So some summary points, I think for, first incorporate regional policies, kind of goes without saying, but I provided an example. Emphasize the use of existing infrastructure. That's where that return on investment comes from. Involve transportation operators, engineers, and technical experts. Can't do it alone. Innovate and maintain interoperability. So in the technologies that do become part of the concepts of how the region operates, make sure they're going to work together. And that also reduces costs and also is really beneficial to a workforce. When you change technologies, sometimes you're leaving a workforce behind or requiring a whole new workforce. Reduce capital costs and long-range transportation plans by working with the major projects. Improve safety and reliability. Help prepare for incidents and disruptions, and prioritize resources that really serve the region, all residents of the region. And concluding slide, the Metro TSMO strategy is helping bring more people together to share what is behind the scenes that makes travel safe and reliable. These youth ambassadors left after a tour of TriMet Security and Operations Center, where several of them were inspired to intern when they saw the TriMet's ITS test bench. So it's a good outcome. And thank you all. I'll turn it back to Nick.
Okay, thanks, Caleb. Great presentation. Just a couple questions. When so you currently have a plan that was adopted. What is the timeline for your next plan to or the current plan to be updated? And what's the process for that?
It's a great question. We give them a lifespan of 10 years, and we did make 10 years on our last one. And, are things changing so quickly? I think one of the benefits is we started this strategy within the context of COVID and seeing patterns change and so we could be relevant, but with a combination of resources. Straight answer is we won't begin until at least 2028, and wouldn't look to adoption until 2030.
Okay. Another question is, does your MPO provide funding for the locals to implement what you have all identified?
Yes, that was that little green box on the funding diagram. I think Joseph showed a slide of more specifics about a program budget. So we at the Metro regional level have a funding pool, and through a policy process, we're choosing which programs to fund. So demand management's one of them, and TSMO is another. We have a transit-oriented development fund and something else I'm forgetting. So we, that's where that decision is made. And then what's interesting is we then get to sub-allocate that funding with our TSMO subcommittee of the regional process. And so we developed a criteria, and really the decision remains with the technical experts. It's really delegated at that point, how we spend the Metro resource, which is nice. We don't go all the way back to Metro Council for each of these recommended projects.
Now, do you get a certain set budget every year, or how's that determined?
It's every 3 years on the federal funding cycle with the MPOs formula funds. So it does require a policy process to go through, and at that point I will be presenting to various leaders in the region and talking about the outcomes from our program, communicating the value, and hopefully seeing that TSMO still meets the policy and gets funded another 3 years.
Okay, have you ever come across any contentious data, and how have you addressed this within the plan?
Contentious data, or just not enough data, or just interpreting data two ways? I think one thing is one of the TSMO program projects is to have a data warehouse at Portland State University, and that keeps track of what's coming off the system. So any station or counter, and we've been able to validate and look at whether some of the private sector data meets our needs. And at times it has not, and contracts have not been continued because of that. So that's, yeah. And then I think just more data. We need, we do have a good picture of reliability on arterials now, but we didn't have that always. So yeah, building up more data in more places. We also have an Oregon travel survey that's going to tell us more of the origin destination data that I referenced as being important to how we allocate resources. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay. I have a couple questions for both of you. First one is, can you describe the outreach process to your local partners?
A monthly meeting is, that subcommittee of our kind of policy leader process. That's made up of our technical experts. That's a public meeting. Anybody's welcome to join and discuss what's on the agenda. Let's see, we have we come around some technical partnerships to share fiber optics for better data communications, and that's through an agreement. And we also use that as a data network that goes between agencies. And then I guess more recently with transit signal priority, we have a lot of pilot testing, a lot of work to, the traffic engineers may be on board with the system, but their IT department has some, firewall issues or something cybersecurity related they need to work through. So that we have set up some special meetings to iron all that out.
At ARC, I would say this is not happening as well as we would like. There had been committees, Eric TSMO committee. It is fallow right now. We're getting that going again. We're going to use the update as an opportunity for that. We do make, I've made presentations to our transportation coordinating committee, and there will be presentations eventually to the board and whatnot. And I think that, so that's, the primary outlet for those. Obviously, we network with different individuals or projects that bring us together. So, for example, our ITS for Us project, I speak with people from Gwinnett County. There was a CV1K project where they were installing roadside units before COVID stopped it, and some of the places where those have been installed, I talk with some of the counties or the officials that are in those areas, because I think, because they're interested, I'm interested. I want to hear what they have to say, what they think, how it's working, and so forth. But I think that's one of the areas, as was noted in our priorities, that we probably need to do a better job on.
Can I add one more thing I skipped over is during the development of our strategy is, of course, we had an engagement plan and we listed where are our contacts to help as an advisory committee, and who are we reaching out to in the community, where are we hearing these voiced needs. And so we had some resource for all that through the planning process, and we wanted to get to director level, so we had leaders helping us shape the TSMO strategy so they could really carry out, they would recognize what our program was when, these projects came through or new projects were proposed. But we did not have all the resources that, say, a MPO's RTP would have. We had a scaled back engagement effort because a TSMO strategy is not gonna, not gonna have the budget or is not, quite the long range planning effort that the whole region is looking across all nodes.
Okay. From the operations side, even though your agencies are not operational agencies, when it comes to traffic incidents or any type of emergency type situations, what is your agency's role in either supporting or getting information out to the public?
Yeah, first of all, the Safe Streets for All funding, and our colleagues that have been doing safety efforts have really put the data together to put an emphasis. I mean, just in our strategy, we heard, street lighting is a real issue. And a lot of these pedestrian crashes are at night. So that's kind of a planning and projects, but we don't have a role for any one particular incident. We, want to see the traffic incident managers convening, that's showing up in a room with a lot of chiefs with badges, it's great to see, but not, something we have direct operations. We want to see those emergency transportation routes. And we also pitch in to support more funding for like drone crash investigation that really saves time on the roadway. It can cover the same territory an investigator can, and a fraction of the time. And so you clear up your road and resume traffic sooner. So we've supported, Oregon State Police going after funding for that.
Yeah, I'm going to say, again, we don't own, operate, or manage any of the facilities, but I'm going to say that Georgia DOT is amazing in their efforts to deal with incident management. They have the Navigator system, obviously with travel information, real-time travel information. They have a traffic management center where they're able to, with thousands of cameras, they're able to send units to clear. They're able to set their HERO program. The acronym escapes me now, but it's basically trucks waiting to go to move things. So they're able, again, if you've been in Atlanta, you know that congestion and traffic is a big thing here. And I think that funding for those kinds of projects to keep that going, and GDOT's really aggressive posture in taking care of that is admirable. It really does. What's the word I want? They really do keep an eye on things and move things along so that the traffic isn't delayed. They have a giant traffic management center. I've been to it a couple of times. It's very impressive. And they take care of that. So I think I think that, I meet with some of the people involved with that where things can be discussed incidentally, but yeah, that's all GDOT. I don't know that ARC, aside from perhaps funding in some initiatives, is we're not owning, managing, or operating any of it.
But there's support though. I mean, you guys are supporting these types of activities either through funding or some other. Okay. Okay.
Yes, of
and
course.
I encourage everybody in the MPO to take a ride with your incident response or your HERO, or be in that truck and see how it's operating. Yeah, I did that, and it was pretty eye-opening. We also have a traveler information system and share cameras across all agencies, so traffic cameras are there, and we have our local cities and counties updating those incidents. So we have and then that's all fed through API to the popular apps. And I forget because it's kind of hidden how it happens, but it's happening all the time.
Yeah, and and that's important because also there's a lot of new technology that's out there. And one of the things that we did down at ITS World Congress is that we had an emergency response and tech day where we invited in some of those first responders so they could see some of the tech that's out there. And if we get a chance, we could put up, there's some information on our in one of our newsletters regarding all of that. But it was really neat to see some of those demos and how all that technology works. And I think a lot of the responders were appreciative of finding out about that technology. Okay, question for both of you. Do you think you have moved beyond needing to sell TSMO solutions, and now you're able to focus on more of what solution and what TSMO solution or contribution to the overall solution, rather than why do we have to do TSMO?
I can start here. I think it depends. I think it varies dramatically to who we're speaking to, because what is it? People with technology are happy to hear about it and ready for, what's new, and people that don't, or, areas that don't have it may not see the value of it. I think there's always a certain amount of selling that goes on in terms of these are solutions. But again, what are the problems they're solving? They may have other priorities. If you're a public works director in a small community, my coming around telling you about signal preemption may not move the needle at all. That being said, where we do get traction with it, we are able to start talking. The conversation is much more about what do we need, not I have to sell it to you. So I think there is a divide there, and I don't think you always know where that divide is, but you have to. I don't think you can ever not educate in this regard.
Yeah, I agree. You have to keep communicating and sharing, and that's partly because the technology changes, but also just new people come on board. We had a suburban city upgrade their pedestrian safety at signalized intersections, and then we came along talking about transit signal priority. And I thought, well, we just prioritized for the pedestrian. Well, we had to go back and think, okay, the signal priority for transit doesn't omit or supersede your pedestrian safety. It's working together. It's when the transit vehicle arrives and it's already going to clear for the passengers or for the pedestrians, to get to transit. So it was, just sort of communicating what works together, how these systems work together, and so that things aren't opposed just based on a misunderstanding. We also, with TSMO have a role, especially at an MPO, in considering those major projects that are, tens of millions that need, we would like to see TSMO elements added. And so what is that? And then, to the other more obscure, to most transportation planning is, how's the data flowing from one place to another? We need our own TSMO investments for projects like that aren't going to be part of what people see. So yeah, always have to communicate.
And I want to jump on something you said, Caleb, which I think is so good, which is that there's turnover. That cannot be underestimated. Both turnover and the numbers of people that are available to do the work or understand or come up through the work. All it takes is I find that without an advocate in an agency or in a locality, you're starting over in many cases. You are starting over, even if they have technology, because to Caleb's point, to add, to say, hey, we have software that will now use your cameras to monitor not just the road, but the condition of the road or the weather or some other element of it. And you could get a blank stare back at you. Doesn't it already do that? We have to do this, and then we have to do all these other things. I mean, because it's not as simple as, handing over a box or something. It requires this additional coordination. And again, if turnover, the lack of understanding, who understands it, where they are in the organization, all those things create obstacles, challenges, frictions that you have to overcome, I think, somewhat regularly.
Okay, for Caleb, how was it decided to warehouse the data at Portland State University, and do you find that warehousing data at a local university is a unique model for an MPO?
I think I think, and I'm sure most MPOs are engaged with their local university for research and development. And then of course, most universities are in the transportation world are a consortium of several. So I think, whatever the MPO is working on should be sort of have a research and development arm. The reasons for the data archive are a bit historic because it was so expensive in the early 2000s to warehouse all this data flowing in, and so we needed the architecture and somebody to manage all this data. And since then, with signal phasing and timing data that's streaming in from intersections, there's been such a growth of data. So I would say it's that the reasons are historic and for reducing costs and sharing a system. And some of it's related to an open data policy, so that we have sort of one resource, one truth, one place where everybody can consultants, public, advocates can go and find the data and process it. So some of it is born out of that. But then I guess fast forwarding to today, what is where are we doing helpful TSMO research and development? Portland State University's helping with looking at artificial intelligence, machine learning, and speaking to sort of the big data questions. And they're also training folks to do that. Not only the students attending Portland State, but also our TSMO staff at our agencies. They've offered SQL training, the statistics software, and also APIs and SQL training. Did I mention? Anyway, they've offered, there's one other I'm forgetting, but it's been great to have them as a partner, not only to share the data, but to store the data, but to expand our capability and our training.
Okay, question for both of you. Does your agency have any role in introducing or piloting new technologies or systems?
Yes.
Well, go ahead, Caleb.
No, you thought of one.
Yeah, I mean, so we are involved, as I think I mentioned in my presentation, this ITS for Us project, ITS JPO, Federal Highway project, and we are, the co-deployment managers of this project. The work is being done obviously by not obviously, but it's being done by consultants. But our role is, sort of the convener, the nexus through which all the elements flow. There are so many partners: Georgia Tech, GDOT, the county of Gwinnett County, and everyone else. And I think what's important, our role that's important is keeping these parts aligned and moving forward. And as we get into the next phases of it, we will be responsible at some level in operating or helping to operate, or taking the data from parts of the work or the project and determining, how is it working or what needs to be done here. So this is a case where, again, it's sort of a pilot project, but we're, we are in the mix on that. And it's something, like I said, I don't think we own it, operate it, but we sort of manage it. I think this is a good way to say it. Co-deployment managers, something like that. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and along, with the TSMO program, we've had a disruption of a lot of sort of emerging mobility and emerging technologies, and so shared use mobility with all the e-scooters and introduction of shared bike systems. We had a pilot of how can the city of Portland and how can other agencies track and make sure those private operators are meeting city policy, and also paying revenue where that's the policy, and so, to keep operating in the city of Portland. So that was a pilot that has turned into a bigger system, and sort of a public-private operator still going in Portland. And then that's more recently, in terms of piloting technologies, we do have our traffic engineers at several agencies working to evaluate new sensor technology at intersections, and one of them's a partnership with Oregon State University and City of Portland to look at LiDAR and different cases for for using them as detection, and then I think it just goes on from there. So the MPO is going to maybe fund a project that is a pilot, and not be involved to I guess really the range is also to champion what comes out of that test and bring it into our future investments and say, okay, we saw this work here, we know it can work elsewhere in the region. Transit signal priority is a big one that I'm supported by, not just what we've partnered with TriMet, but our other sides of Metro with improving high capacity transit and better bus operations.
Okay. I know we're right at time here, but I have
Okay.
one more question that came through. When you guys deploy your strategies, how do you assess or evaluate their effectiveness? And then how do you share that information?
Yeah, I wish it were more routine. We're first of all making sure when we program our funds, when we're going through a prioritization process, I think that's the biggest connection to make sure we're evaluating under the strategy, or sorry, funding projects under the strategy. So that clears one big element, and then the other is kind of looking at what all the TSMO, I have a list of all the TSMO related projects in our region, and I look through and see how many of these cover the 21 actions we have in our TSMO strategy, and what are we missing? Some things are going on without much TSMO program support, so that's great. Like TriMet keeps innovating their trip tools for travelers to catch, and also their transit information displays. So there's not a big participation there, but we'll still count it in this overall regional rollout. So I think it's mainly like what's going on in the region, what are the gaps, and then we have some, we're keeping up with our congestion management process evaluation, but that's through the national data set, and other evaluation touch points.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer for that. We are certainly monitoring data, but we are not collecting the data. That is, our work with GDOT sort of falls into that. But I don't know, and again, with the congestion mitigation, like what Caleb was saying, there's some of that, but that's at a different level. I can't answer that question because I'm not 100% sure how to answer that properly right now. So
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough. All right. Well, I just want to thank both of you, both Joseph and Caleb. Thanks for all of the fantastic information. I want to thank all of our participants for hanging in there. I know we went a little bit over, but I think this was a great discussion. And just wanted to also let folks know that if you are attending the AMPO annual meeting, which is coming up next week, NOCO will have a booth at that meeting. We're booth number 1. So if you want to continue the conversation or you want to find out more about what we do, swing by, and we're happy to talk with you. So thanks again, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Joseph. Thank you all.